like to start off by thanking everybody for coming today. We've gathered together in this meeting room to do some Rejoice brainstorming. The agenda for today, we're going to look at our current software base, which includes third-party software, access apps and islands, the database, and we're also going to look at a roadmap on how to do some improvements to our current software, and we're going to discuss the multiple phases that we're going to use. Our current software begins with third-party software. This includes Salesforce, NetSuite, Eldorado, other apps, and ACCU. These applications are interfaced with Microsoft tool called SQL Server Integration Services, or SSIS. So what SSIS does is it takes data from these databases and it puts it into a SQL server located on our premise. The SQL server has multiple databases in the production database server. This includes banking, Salesforce Mart, NetSuite Mart, Eldo Mart, Cisco Mart, VSE, and many, many others. What happens is if you make a change in Salesforce, that change is picked up on a daily basis by the SSIS software and it's put into the appropriate place. For Salesforce, it's put into Salesforce Mart, and it may also be put into other databases as well. If Salesforce wants to look at real-time data, we do this through a tool called Lightning Connect. Lightning Connect has a capability of accessing third-party data and allowing you to display it on Salesforce screens. For interfacing with ACCU, we have an in-house tool called MSE. MSE is the tool that moves data from one ACCU account to another in order to do sharing of medical bills. Next, we have access apps. These were written several years ago, most of them. These applications are desktop applications that access the SQL Server databases directly, allowing it to view and modify data in SQL Server. Now notice that SPT only talks to SQL Server. It does not talk to any of the third-party software directly. If a change is made in Salesforce, the next day it will be downloaded by SSIS and it will be visible on the SPT screen. If SPT makes changes to the database, the next morning SSIS will upload that to any third-party system that needs it. In addition to the access apps, we also have access islands. These islands act as the reporting arm for all the third-party software. These are basically just do queries against the SQL Server database. Each one of them is a collection of SQL Server queries. These access applications have several issues. The first is that there's limited concurrent users. A single copy of an access application can only serve 20 to 30 people. So as a workaround, we have duplication of applications. In other words, many copies of the same application running, and users have to know which copy they're supposed to be using. We have an unknown user base. And what we mean by that is we don't know which applications or functions in those applications are in use and what users are using those functions. We also have a lot of duplication of database access code, which makes this access solution very difficult to refactor. The actual number of access apps is 6 or 7 apps, but it's hard to determine which ones at times because inside the directory where all of the access apps are, you can see we have many, many access applications. Now some of them, like these ADP ones, are just copies of the applications. The reason they're copied is so that we have 20 to 30 users per instance. But you also notice we have a lot of backup applications and we have things that just don't seem to be one of the major applications at all. In addition to the access apps, we have access islands. These are, as stated previously, reporting applications that do queries against the SQL Server database. And as you can see, there's many, many of these. Some of them may be in use, some may not. There's lots of backups. We have no idea why. Little individual applications that some of them haven't been changed in many years. We also have issues with the current SQL database. First of all, it's very complex. There's over 40 databases, and the reason for this was that as an Access app was added, a new database was added rather than adding additional tables to the current database. Relationships were not defined. This means there's no primary keys and no foreign keys. There's a lot of duplication of data. For example, a member's address may actually be in multiple places in the SQL Server database, as well as being in multiple places out in the third-party applications. In a previous meeting, we asked Mike Chandler to give us an idea what the database looks like, and this is how Mike described the database. He basically just drew a big plate of spaghetti. This is what our current database looks like. It really needs to be cleaned up. The SQL database is comprised of 40 plus databases. Here's a full list of the ones that are out in our production server. What are we doing to fix this? Let's look at our roadmap of the phases that we have currently planned or in progress to fix some of these issues. Phase 1 has 3 parts. The first one is to eliminate access islands. The second part is to migrate SSIS to SQL Server off of SQL Server 2008. Third is to replace SBT with Rejoice. In Phase 2, we will replace the remaining Access apps with Rejoice. And in Phase 3, we'll begin to refactor the database. Phase 1A, let's take a look at this. Eliminating the access islands. So before the conversion, we have a bunch of access island applications. They connect to our SQL server to do reporting. After the conversion, we'll still have all the same databases in our SQL server, and we're going to grab our trusty friend SQL Server Integration Services, and we're going to use this to create a single OLAP database on a separate server. That database will be used to run business intelligence software and SQL Server reporting services. By having a single normalized database, we're able to write reports and other business intelligence much quicker than we could against 40 separate databases. In addition, we've isolated ourselves from the 40 separate databases. So as we go through the process of refactoring these databases, we'll tweak the SQL integration services to create the same OLAP database from a different source, thus protecting all the reports that we created from all the changes that are required out in the database. Phase 1C is to replace SBT with a web-based platform. We've had a couple other presentations that describe what the Rejoice architecture is going to look like. A couple of the key factors is there's a service layer that isolates the user interface from the database. What this allows us to do is, after the application has been written, we can remodel the database, make some changes in the service layer, and make very few changes, if any, to the application layer. This will allow us to do the conversion of the database much quicker. So why don't we just refactor the database first? Well, there's several reasons. The first is that all the applications would need to be changed. This includes the 7 Access apps, as well as the 25 or so access islands. We'd also have to convert SSIS and MSE. Another reason why we don't do this is we have a need for immediate improvements for open enrollment. And finally, most of the current developers on the Rejoice project are contractors. They're only going to be on this project for a couple of months before their contract ends. That simply doesn't give us time to do much database refactoring, and we would start the learning process all over again. With all that, do we have any questions?